My name is Ari. I'm from the College of Veterinary Medicine, and I'm here to talk about two things that I sort of nerd out about: comic books, and more importantly, weird animals. So hopefully I'll get to talk about a couple things tonight that you guys have never heard of before. Open your eyes a little bit. So I'm going to restrict my talk, for those of you who do know about comic books, I'm going to restrict it to DC and Marvel, which are like the two biggest franchises. There's a whole bunch of other franchises out there, but frankly, even with these two guys, it's way too many people to cover. You know? And if you think that's confusing to keep track of, imagine when they're fighting their alien clones. Or, even worse, if you've got a complete and total dimensional collapse and you have 20 versions of every character all fighting at the same time. Obviously, it can be a little confusing. So, superpowers. This is a nice fancy chart that someone put together of the superpowers. They put them into groups, and we can see here that animal superpowers are one of the 6 major groups. And why not? It's easy to do. You give someone the powers of a lion or a tiger or a shark or something, and you got a superhero or a villain or whatever. And you got a bunch of different guys. You can look like an animal, you can shapeshift into one, you can take their powers. Maybe there's one animal in particular that you turn into or have the powers of, or maybe you don't know what the fuck you're doing. you just happen to like that animal a whole lot. And the same thing goes with the villains. A couple different themes. And if you look at some of the early Spider-Man, pretty much every villain that he fought right off the bat was animal themed. Not really original, but again, it's easy to do. So we are not going to talk about any of those animal superpowers. It's pretty easy, tiger, whatever. What we're going to talk about is some superpowers that fall elsewhere in this chart, things that you might find unlikely or impossible. But actually, after the fact, we've discovered that they do have a basis in reality. And we can find them if we look at the right angles. So, I figured I'd start with bone weapons. This one's possible, or popular rather. But I'm pretty sure if you know anything about comics, you can guess who everyone jumps to when you think of bone weapons. It's Wolverine, right? And I thought about that, but really Wolverine, while he's got bone weapons, really they're claws. And that's not really that fantastic. I mean, cats, damn. So I tried to go a little deeper, and I went with Mara. So she's sort of a second stringer, but she can basically grow and extrude bones from different parts of her body and use them as weapons and armor. So relevant. She's been all over the place, but usually she's generally a bad guy. And so you're basically growing weapons out of your own body to use, So what would be a real-life correlate to that? This is the Iberian ribbed newt, Pleurodellus wall, and he's not quite as impressive looking as Ramsey, but bear with me. This guy lives in Europe, mostly in the Iberian Peninsula, and they're pretty big for a salamander. They get about 1 foot long. And like many salamanders, one of the defense mechanisms that they sort of share is that when they're threatened by a predator, they have sort of a toxic or noxious slime coating, which doesn't taste really good, and in some cases, including this one, is venomous. But they'll sort of puff themselves up to make themselves look bigger and sort of hopefully scare the predator away. So the X-ray up in the left-hand corner here shows on the left one of these salamanders sort of just hanging out comfortably, and you can see there's sort of a backwards angle on those ribs as he's at rest. And then the picture on the radiograph on the right, the caption that came with this stated that this was under mild irritation. I think they just poked it until they get some kind of reaction. But you can see that the ribs are now actually pointing straight outwards. So he has actually flexed them out to make himself appear larger. And this picture on the right is a CT reconstruction of the vertebral column. And so the head's at the top, tail's at the bottom. And those ribs you can see are sort of curved forward and are actually kind of pointy. And so this guy, rather than just making himself appear larger, he has double ribs, or double joints attaching the ribs to the vertebral column. And so when he gets mad, he actually pushes the ribs out beyond the body wall. So he basically pops the ribs out of his body. In the process, they pick up a very handy poisonous slime coating, which is nice if you don't want someone to mess with you. So yeah, if you were to pick this guy up or try to bite him, you would get a mouthful of poisoned ribs. So he's stabbing you with his ribs. It doesn't look that impressive, but I feel comfortable that we can consider this a superpower, right? Yeah. So what's next? Mind control. So, for mind control, again, I went a little more obscure. I went with Starro, and this is in the DC universe. Basically, it's a giant alien starfish, and he pops up from time to time. And his power, pretty much, he just wants to conquer stuff. And so, he has mind control powers, or as you can see here, he can actually make little tiny clones of himself. And so, you know Starro's around because all of a sudden everyone's walking around with a starfish attached to their face. And they're all doing his bidding. So that's basically how it works. And in the past, he has done things like take over all of New York City with these mind control starfish. So this is pretty, pretty out there, pretty wild. So the vet students will appreciate this. This is Dicrocelium dendriticum, and it's a liver fluke. It's a trematode, and the adult, this is a little tiny guy, but the adult lives in the bile ducts of herbivores, so like cows and sheep. And it has a 3-stage life cycle that the CDC So they got a really nice thing here, but honestly, the best job I found of this was done by the oatmeal. I did not put the whole thing in here, it was tempting, but even if you don't care about parasites, it's pretty hilarious to read, so I recommend you check it out. But basically, the way this works is the adult worm in the bile ducts lays some eggs. They get pooped out, cow poop. Snails apparently like cow poop, so they eat the cow poop, and they eat the eggs. Eggs hatch, and then they're secreted in the slug's respiratory tract as what is scientifically referred to as slime balls. So ants apparently find these slime balls irresistible. This is like the best thing ever. And so they drink the slime balls, and then the baby flukes will swim to the ant's brain and basically make themselves a little nest in the area of the brain that is motor control. And during the daytime, everything walks around as normal. You have absolutely no idea if there's anything wrong with him. He goes about his business. And then every night, the fluke drives the ant outside, makes him climb a tall blade of grass, and then makes him bite on and attach to the end of the blade of grass, and then hang out all night. And then if nothing happens, before the sun comes up, they go back around their business, and again, you have no idea there's anything wrong with this ant at all. It's behaving completely normally except at night. And the goal is to get eaten by a cow or a sheep, thus completing the life cycle. So I think we are lucky that this fluke's only goal is to get eaten by a cow, because quite frankly, with the number of ants out there in the world, if he was bent on world domination, I think he's got a pretty good shot at it. Who pays attention to what the ants are doing anyways, right? Until it's too late. All right. This one's not necessarily a specific superpower in and of itself, but it comes with guys that have super strength, and it's pretty cool. It's called the concussive clap. And the idea is that you're so strong that if you're surrounded by a whole bunch of weaker guys that are just sort of mobbing you, or there's a poisonous gas cloud or something like that, you clap your hands so hard, the shock wave blows everything away from you. It's a lot of fun to watch. It looks pretty impressive. So where are we going to find this in the animal kingdom? The Hulk. This is a favorite move of the Hulk. He probably uses this more than anybody else, and rightly so. His hands are like that big. He can pull it off. That's Bruce Banner. You all, I'm sure, know the Hulk. So this is the pistol shrimp. And again, not as impressive looking as the superhero that he's copying, but there's about 600 some species, and they're pretty tiny, unassuming little shrimp, about 1 to 2 inches long, and they get their name from the fact that one of their claws is larger than the other, and they pop their claws together basically to stun prey. So they'll hang out and wait till something creeps close enough, and then they'll pop this claw. And we thought the sound was actually what stunned them enough, long enough for him to sneak out and grab them and pull them in. And they make a lot of noise. As small as they are, they interfere with sonar. And in World War II, apparently submarines would actually find colonies of these guys and use the noise produced by them to hide from enemy subsweepers. So, you know, it's worth taking a closer look at. So it turns out that the noise being produced is not actually the sound of the claw snapping shut. When the claw snaps shut, it happens so quickly and so forcefully that it ejects a jet of water from the joint of the claw. And you can see it right here being shot out at 62 miles an hour. Pretty cool. The sound that's being produced is actually between here and here. So this space right here is what's called a cavitation bubble, and I'm sure if there are engineer people here, you know way more about this than I do, but the idea is that it's not really a bubble as such. It's just the water moves so quickly that there's a vacuum left behind. And so the noise is produced when the surrounding water rushes in to fill that vacuum. And it happens really, really quickly, and that's where the popping noise comes from, is that vacuum collapsing. So that's cool. But it turns out when they look at this on slow motion camera, that there's a burst of light, and they have no idea where this comes from. I mean, so there's a lot of creatures out there that have bioluminescence and stuff like that. There's been no indication at all that this was the case. So it turns out that the light is coming from sonoluminescence, and so the shock waves are so powerful in the water medium that they produce friction, and that friction produces heat. It's a lot of sound condensed in a really small space, produces heat. But not only that, it produces so much heat that it gives off light. And they looked at the wavelength of this light and measured the internal temperature of that cavitation bubble, 5,000 Kelvin. So he doesn't even need both hands. And he's going to clap hard enough to produce 5,000 temperatures. So I think that counts as a superpower, because the Hulk doesn't need to clap hard enough to produce light. Right. Next one up is immortality. So the bad guy I chose for this is Apocalypse. He's pretty much one of the big baddies in the X-Men universe, and he comes back again and again and again. And basically, he is a mutant and he's immortal, among many, many other things. But the basic power that's attributed to him is the fact that he has complete control of his body on a cellular level. So he can shapeshift, he can make himself really big, he can merge with technology, and every time he pops up, he can do something different. But the biggest thing is he's immortal, and so every couple hundred years he'll flee back to his underground pyramid fortress and rest for a couple decades and basically completely rejuvenate all his cells. So that's pretty cool. So for animals, again, nothing like the comic book version, but this is Turritopsis nitricula, and it is a really, really tiny jellyfish, 1.5 millimeters in diameter. And when this guy was first described back in the 80s, it was found exclusively in the Caribbean Sea. Right. So to understand how this guy has immortality, you have to know a little bit more about the jellyfish life cycle, and I'll breeze through it because it's not really that exciting. But basically, you have two reproductive stages in jellyfish. You have the medusa, which is the adult jellyfish. They'll be male or female, and they'll reproduce sexually. When an egg is fertilized, it turns into this little tiny larva, swims around for a few days, and becomes a polyp, attaches to a solid surface. Looks just like a little sea anemone or a coral polyp. And these actually become colonial organisms. So you have multiple polyps arising from one planular larva. And then they'll just hang out for a while, and then under some sort of stress, temperature change, salinity, something like that, they'll start to bud. And so the top of that polyp will pop off as an ephyra and grow up into an adult jellyfish. And they can do this repeatedly. So one polyp can produce multiple ephyra, all growing up into adult jellyfish. So where does the immortality come in? So this guy, under the same sorts of environmental stresses that make them start budding as a polyp, Turritopsis will revert from the medusa form back to a polyp form. And one of those stresses that causes this reversion is senescence. So basically, if you get too old, you revert back to your childhood form. And this happens completely. Now there are cases of this kind of, it's called cellular transdifferentiation. There are cases where it happens on like a local scale, like to regenerate a limb or a tail or something like that. But in this case, basically, they flip themselves inside out, they attach to a solid surface, and then all of their cells are either transformed back into the polyp form or resorbed. And what you have at the end is a polyp that's indistinguishable from the original polyp that the adult came from. In experiments, this happens every single time. So you've got 2 reproductive stages and no death. This seems like it might be something people are concerned about. And in fact, this looks more like the kind of headline you get like the day you Google, but the mortal jellyfish swarming across the world. And this is in fact actually happening. They're finding these jellyfish everywhere. They're tiny, so you don't notice, but it's a real concern because jellyfish in general feed at the bottom of the food chain. And if these guys are eating all the food at the base of the food chain, there's not a whole lot that eats jellyfish. We're looking at some real serious environmental impacts down the road. So I was thinking about what we would do about this. I mean, who is equipped to manage a million tiny jellyfish?
Etymology man!
I don't think that you can talk to these guys. So I came across this. So this sounds like a job for what takes care of jellyfish? I was prepared for complete silence on that. So thank you. Last but not least, this is my favorite. We're talking about shape-shifting. Now for this, I did go with Mystique. It's a cliche, but everyone knows her. She's hot. And part of the reason I went with Mystique is because while she can change her shape, she can't really change anything else. She can't change her mass. So all the mass that she has, that's it. She can make herself bigger, but she's going to get skinnier. Make herself smaller, she's going to get heavier. And so animals that can do this. A quick word about mimics. Everyone's seen it. There's some really bizarre stuff out there, and it works really well. Whether you just want to make yourself look like something in the environment, like a leaf or bird poop, this is a viable survival technique. Or you want to make yourself look like your poisonous cousin, or that over there. Do you know what that is? It's a caterpillar, right? How weird is that? But that's not what I'm going to talk about. These guys all pretty much have one trick, and it works really well, and so they run with that. But that's not good enough to be counted as a superpower. So this is Octopus mimicus, and it's called the mimic octopus. This guy's a relatively recent discovery, not until 1998. And most of that is because where this guy lives is not the really nice exotic coral reefs where you find a lot of other octopi. This guy lives in river mouth outlets and delta areas where the water's really silty, and you just have a mud or a sand bottom. And we all know that octopuses are masters of camouflage in disguise. I mean, we've all seen videos, they literally disappear right in front of your eyes. But where do you hide? I mean, you know, what are you going to do if this is where you grow up? So the mimic octopus has learned to mimic more than one animal. And they're still not completely sure exactly how it learns how to do this, but I'll give you a couple examples. So in the top left here is a banded sole, and this is a flatfish that's highly venomous, so no one eats this guy. And that's a mimic octopus. Top right here is a banded sea snake. Again, highly venomous, eats fish. Mimic octopus. The lionfish. Everyone knows the lionfish. They're everywhere. They're invading places they've never been before, and that's because pretty much no one eats them because those venomous barbs are pretty painful. And that's a mimic octopus. And then everyone knows the stingray. So, to date, this guy has been observed mimicking 15 species. XKC was kind enough to come up with a new identification chart. species, that's only the ones that we recognize. They still do there's people whose entire careers now are based on looking at this thing in the wild. And it does stuff that we have no idea what it means. If it's just weird and therefore confuses predators or what. But 15 recognized species. And I think that definitely counts as a superpower. So I just wanted to show this really quick, just because it loses its impact. So this is it when he's actually moving, and I think you can appreciate, because he doesn't just change his shape, he changes his behavior. In every single case, he changes the way that he acts, the way that he moves, where he is, in order to best accommodate himself. And he'll pick an animal based on, see like this, swimming in the middle of the water column like this, an octopus couldn't do. It would be in a second. But in this one case, he can get away with it. And it does some of the weird stuff too. If you just watch it for a second, there's some things that they frankly just aren't really sure what it's doing. That's they're not really sure what that is. But it's definitely confusing. If you were coming after an octopus and it started doing that, you would probably back off and leave it alone. These are some of my references, and thank you very much.